What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. Today, the third and final part of the 1998 WWF Cardinal Trivia cards. What are we going to find today? First card on today's video, Sable. It's a Sable card. I did enjoy during this time her feud with Mark Merrow, otherwise known as Johnny B. Bad.
Kick your Buddha with my Buddha Buddha!
In hindsight, though, maybe this wasn't the greatest idea for a feud. Storytelling-wise, it was really good, but there's an underbelly kind of growing up of domestic violence within the storyline, I thought. So, in hindsight, maybe not such a good idea. But then again, now that we're thinking about it, what was a good idea, politically correct-wise, in the Attitude Era? Not much. Oh, sorry, I was getting ready for our next card. Steve Blackman, Stickman as I used to call him. I actually was a huge fan of Steve Blackman. I loved the gimmick, I loved his style. Just so much different than all the other wrestlers at the time. But I couldn't help think, when I watched him wrestling or in promos or just anytime he appeared on the screen, it just reminded me of all the crazy 90s karate and kung fu, kickboxer, any Chuck Norris kind of movie, all of that stuff. That was Steve Blackman to me. I loved it. This is an alright card. Like I said, I'm a fan, so maybe I'm more biased to liking it just because I'm a fan. That's the point of trading cards, right? Interesting note, though. In 1999, Comic Images did a SmackDown card set. Most are familiar with the Comic Images 98 set, but they did one in 99 as well for the SmackDown brand. And interestingly enough, once again, quality control, I've talked about this in previous videos, they used this exact same image on one of those 1999 cards. Steven Regal. What? Steven? Thought it was Lord Steve. No. This is kind of a weird time for his career when he was in the WWF at the time. We weren't quite to real man's man Steve Regal. He's a man! But this was kind of getting into it. Again, what a terrible card. I just hate this gimmick. I love Lord Steven Regal because you could tell he was an actual wrestler. He could really wrestle, mat wrestle, anyway. And then you love to hate him. You know, the snobby, arrogant. He'd walk to the ring in his I'm better than you, Blue Bloods gimmick. And it just really worked as a heel. But this man's man, working man that you're seeing him evolve into in the WWF, not a fan. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, I don't even have to say much about this card, but guess what I'm going to, because I'm a huge Steve Austin guy. I love this card. To me, this card represents everything about the Attitude Era. And it also represents the height of Steve Austin's career. He's at the top of his game here. You got that pose in the picture. You've got the vest. I mean, you can almost hear the glass shatter and his music hit as you're just looking at this picture.
Check it out.
And like I said in the last video with The Rock, everybody wants the 97. They're chasing that. Not as many people looking at the 98. Same thing could be said about this one. A lot of people are chasing that 97. However, I think the 98's a better card. It's also cheaper, a little bit harder to find, but you can find it if you dig hard enough. Another interesting thing about this, I talk about how the rising tide lifts all ships, so to speak, and there's a trickle-down effect. We've seen recently with the 82 All-Stars, Hulk Hogan, rookie, whatever, setting all-time records. Well, guess what? Not too long after that, we saw the 85 Topps Hogan start coming up. So then, is the 85 All-Stars Hogan next? Is it one of those pre-82 All-Stars paper magazine cards next? Is it 87 Topps? Because there's tons of that out there. I don't know. But this is the kind of thing you have to think about when you're looking to buy and invest in cards from a value perspective. Takami Chinoku. I was always a huge fan. Unfortunately, I actually like these cards better, but he had several BBM cards in Japan before this one came out. I always loved Taka's style. I just associate him automatically every single time I see him with that light heavyweight division, I believe it was called, WWE put out, and he was their first champion, if I remember right, and they were trying to compete with WCW's cruiserweight division, which failed miserably. WCW was so far ahead of the light heavyweight, cruiserweight, whatever you want to call it, but that's just, it's a point in time. When I look at this card, it just takes me right back, like that Stone Cold Steve Austin, takes me right back to the heart of the Attitude Era. Actually, now that I think about it, almost all of these cards, when I look at the pictures, I just immediately associate with sitting there right in the middle of the Monday Night Wars, flipping channels back and forth. Ultimately, that's what trading cards are all about. Just You look at that picture, it brings back a flood of memories and nostalgia. You gotta love it. Triple H, another representation of DX here, another representation of the Attitude Era. And it was interesting kind of looking back at this. During this time, we started seeing an all-time great kind of evolving in front of our eyes to what he is now, running NXT and being a legend. I was never a huge fan of Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Think of it.
But I understand the gimmick and why they did that. You know, it's kind of like a dollar store version of Lord Steven Regal that I talked about previously. But again, we saw Hunter Hearst Helmsley start evolving into Triple H and then go on to be The Game. You know the rest of the history. The Undertaker. Another great Undertaker card, but that's about it. It's another Undertaker card. There's no really key features of this card other than the fact that I guess this was probably one of the last cards we got, this version of The Undertaker. Shortly after this, he would become the leader of the Ministry and then Corporate Ministry, so he looked a little different than he did here. And then, of course, when he went on to do the biker gimmick, totally changed his look. I believe in the next trivia card set, which we'll cover that down the road, is when he had one of his first cards as Biker Undertaker. Val Venus.
Hello, ladies.
Not a bad photo here, an okay card. If you're a Val Venus fan, go for it. I was never a huge fan of the character. I thought he was a pretty good in-ring wrestler, and I understand the gimmick. And again, Attitude Era, you probably would not, actually I could almost guarantee you're not going to see this kind of a gimmick on WWE, on Fox on Friday nights with these major sponsorships. Probably not going to happen. Product of the Attitude Era, it was kind of fun, so there you go. Vince McMahon. Now, I love all Vince McMahon cards. Vince McMahon gets a lot of heat from a lot of the internet wrestling fans, which, okay. I think people don't understand how important he is in wrestling history. Some do, some don't. The reason I say that is if there's not a Hulk Hogan, if he doesn't come to WWF, and Vince doesn't take Hogan and strap the rocket to him, so to speak, and if they don't do WrestleMania, we don't have wrestling like we know it today. We could still be in the territory days, which could be good and bad. A lot of the realism and the wrestling aspect of the territory days I think was awesome. But we wouldn't have, we may not even have wrestling cards. We would not possibly have action figures. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. We don't really know. But the fact is, Vince McMahon is essentially, I'll give Brett McGrath credit for saying this, the Walt Disney of professional wrestling.
We make movies.
One other note about this card is this is like corporate Vince here. This is when he was feuding with Austin, and then you'd eventually see him Corporate Ministry during that time period. It's just too bad that we couldn't get the denim vest wearing Vince McMahon. You had that Raw is War look, trying to be gritty on Monday nights wearing his denim vest. Just something funny. Last card in the set and last card on today's video, X-Pac. If there was ever a card to represent what the Monday Night Wars was all about, it's this card right here. Started off as 1-2-3 Kid in the WWF, jumps to WCW, becomes 6, joins the NWO, and then jumps back to WWF to join DX. So he's bouncing back and forth, which is what the Monday Night Wars was all about. You never know who was going to show up where. But also, he's part of like the two biggest factions. Well, I mean, you could say like the Four Horsemen, I suppose. But during this period, the two biggest factions of NWO and DX in the two rival corporations, and he was part of both. Amazing. Thanks for checking out the video. If you're digging this, give me one of these, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications. Also make sure to go into the show notes, check out the links to the podcast that I've recently started. Another podcast called Wrestling with Cards, kind of an audio companion piece to a lot of the videos you see on this channel, as well as teaming up with Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com to form the podcast Worlds Collide, where we get two different minds talking everything wrestling cards. So make sure you go check those out on all the popular podcast platforms. Give us a review, share it with your friends, share it with wrestling community, share it with everybody in the sports card community. Thanks.